Today you're going to finish up your soldering. Hopefully you've reached this stage or close to it. You've got all your solder joints made. The next step, of course, is going to be to clip those leads. I'm going to show you how that's done here in just a second. Once you clip the leads, then you're going to be bringing it up to me and I'm going to do a solder check. And I'm looking for the quality of your soldering. I'm looking if we have, like on the IC over here, you should see nice smooth mounds of solder. I shouldn't see the hole through there. If I see the hole, you didn't add enough solder. Wait till I'm done, please. Okay? I'm looking on all the other connections. They should form nice smooth mounds of silver. Okay? If I see an obviously dull joint, I may tell you need to go back and touch that up again. That's a cold solder joint. It may be unreliable. But you can see they look like little volcanoes or little mounds when they're done properly. Okay? Just to verify, wait till I'm done, okay? Just to verify once again, I used about 8 inches of solder, about this much solder, to do the entire board. I did it in about 5 minutes before you guys came in, so I'd have this one as an example. So some of you that are burning through solder, I gave you 4 pieces that long yesterday, and only a couple of people finished, so they're the only ones that should have gone through all their solder. And I gave you that amount again today. There is no way you should be using more than that. Okay? It's a little bit at a time. You know, when you're tapping that soldering iron, you're telling me you got too much solder on it. If you're doing that all the time and you're constantly splashing solder off on the stand, you're putting it in the wrong place. You're putting it on the tip of the iron. If it doesn't go, when you hit that joint with your iron, like let's say I'm doing this one right here, you hit that joint with your iron. If the solder doesn't flow in immediately, you're not making the proper contact. You got to hit it at the right angle, and that will heat up the entire joint. The joint is the donut and the wire, or in the case of these, the IC pad and the wire. So heat up that entire joint before you add the solder, okay? Once you've soldered everything, okay, and when I say everything, I'm of course excluding the battery, which the wires will be sticking through here. You're not soldering that. That's just being used as your stand right now. And you're not soldering anything in these 3 holes. You shouldn't be putting solder in any hole that doesn't have a wire coming through it. Okay? So you're not soldering anything in these 3 holes. Late again. It's not funny. Those 3 holes are going to be for the Hall sensor. The Hall sensor is the actual magnetic sensor. I'm going to show you how to put that in here next. Okay. Any questions now on the soldering part? Yes.
So if you were to get it back and find out you have some cold joints, couldn't you just touch them up before?
Yes, but when you bring it up to me, you can fix it for your own purposes. But when you bring it up to me for the check, whatever I see is what I'm grading. Of course, you want to correct those things so that you know it doesn't affect your grade. I mean, it doesn't affect your final grade on how the circuit works, but it will affect your solder check grade. So that's why you need to be inspecting these as you go. One of the things that will happen invariably for most of you is you'll be doing, let's say, these 3 joints here that are very close to each other, and you'll end up making one big glob where you got too much solder on. I'm not giving you the desolder vacuum. I'm not giving you the desolder braid. Head up, David. In fact, you don't need it. All you need to do is make sure that your soldering iron has no extra solder on it right now, and you hold it up in the air, okay? And then you take the board and the part in question where it has extra solder, you hold it above it like this and you touch it to that spot. Gravity will, as that heats up, will carry the solder onto the soldering iron. Then you can tap it off. You'll find that technique works pretty well for getting rid of the excess solder. All right, so now we're ready to move on. We're going to hook up our battery holder. This was the thing you were using as the stand last class. And I had you put these 4 nuts on the bolts. You're going to have to take those off. And actually, I'm going to give you this. Mine doesn't have it right now, but I'm going to give you this with a battery on it, in it. The reason being is I don't want all the bolts to fall out when you flip this upside down, just like we did when we assembled this, okay? So once you take off the 4 nuts, then you've got your 4 bolt heads coming through, and you got your 2 battery connections there. those battery connections will be going through these two holes. This is the one part that actually gets attached to the solder side. We're going to use this side of the board and we're going to put it on like so. Okay, I'm going to repeat that so everybody understands. This isn't going to go on like this. We put it on our stand like that for the purposes of soldering, so it would act like a stand. But when we're going to use it as a battery holder, it goes down like this. So on one side you see all the components. On the other side now it's going to be covered up by the battery holder. Do you see now why you have to bring it up to me for your check before you put this on? Okay, because once you put that on, I'm not going to be able to see hardly any of your solder joints. They'll be covered up. Now let me backtrack because I forgot to talk about the clipping. At your stations, you've been given a pair of diagonal cutters you may have to share, or if someone's not clipping wires at one of the other stations, you can go and use theirs. Just return them when you're done. Your board probably looks like this, with wires sticking off. Maybe you bent them out of the way. You should have after you soldered them. And now you've got to go through and clip off the leads. It's real simple. All you have to do is get as close to the top of that mound as possible. So if I'm going to do, let's say, this one right here in the corner, I get the diagonal cutters down there like so, as close to that as I can, and snip it off, okay? Because you're going to have, 60 or so leads coming off, that's a lot of little clippings. Please do this over the yellow containers at your station, the big ones. Okay, you can just pull that over in front of you and do all your clipping over that. So you're clipping them very close. It isn't necessary for you to clip the IC leads. They're already short enough, okay? And some of these leads that are super short, you might not need to clip as well. I would probably still clip off the ends of the switch leads here after you solder. Do not do this along the way. Solder everything and then go back and clip the leads off. Is everybody clear on that? Nick?
Well, if there's like a big like thing of wires, you really can't move them too much.
You can move them. The only reason you wouldn't be able to move them is if you got solder on the big glob. Is that what you're talking about?
No.
Okay. I did mine in 5 minutes, and all I did is when a wire was in the way, I just used my fingernail, I pulled it and pushed it the other way. It's wire. It's not like it's going to be that hard to move out of the way. Okay? So no, you should not be clipping along the way. And I'm going to go around and check. Okay? I don't want you guys clipping until you're completely done. Just move the wire to the other direction, and you'll be just fine. Okay? All right, so now I put my battery holder on this side. The next step is to make sure that those two leads, two battery connections, are lined up with the holes. They can swing back and forth. They can move side to side, I should say, like this a little bit. So bend them, turn them so they're lined up with the hole. Now, will they go all the way through on the other side? No, they will not. But you should see the ends of them just peeking through there and there. And once you've got it lined up properly, then you can put the nuts back on. Make sure you don't get them cross-threaded. Cross-threading means you start them a little crooked and then they don't want to go down. If you start them right, they'll go down quite easily. Okay? So you get those 4 nuts down in place. And then at each station, I've given you a screwdriver. This last one's on here. Okay, so all you need to do now, once you get the nut started on the other side, is take that battery out of the holder, hold the nut with your finger on one side, use the screwdriver on the other side, tighten it down. It'll spin a little bit, but you can get it plenty tight enough that way. Just hold it that way, tighten it down. Don't get too carried away. Want it tight, but not until things start cracking. Okay? We still don't want to install the battery. We're going to leave it wrapped in plastic. I'm just going to put it back in the other way right now so I don't lose it. Then I'm going to solder those two connections. Notice I'm doing this soldering from this side of the board. I'm not doing it from the other side, although I could. I'm going to go ahead and get some solder to flow in there, and it should totally fill that hole. And then I'm going to inspect it from the other side. And if you did it right, you'll see that it actually came out on the other side. If you can see, there we go, right there. So it's totally filled in that hole, okay? All right, so now you got a couple more things to do. Once that's done, you take your clamp. What I told you to do is you should have had the long side of the clamp against the, of the bracket, I should say, the L bracket against the clamp. The short side is the part that's going to go here on the board in those two little footprints, okay? So I'm going to take these two short bolts out. Again, the short bolts should be in the short side. I'm going to make sure that these two brackets face the same direction, like so. And then I'm going to put it on this side of the board with a little white outline. I'm going to line it up, and I'm going to put my bolts through on the other side and tighten that right down. Don't tighten it all the way until you get both bolts in. This one on the other side. All right, almost done. Last step then. If you loosen these, you can take out the magnet. Which side should be closest to the tape? South side. You can check it. Should say S, or the other side should say north, one of the two. If you find later on your circuit's not working as expected, you may want to go back and double check that the person who labeled your magnet did it properly. Okay? These three connections here are for the Hall sensor that actually detects the magnetism change. This is your Hall sensor. It has a side with a number on it. The side says 23L, and then it has a wider side with like a circle on it. What we want to do is just spread those wires slightly, enough that we can match the spacing here on the board. Then we're going to pull off the backing on that double stick tape. Going to slide that through. You never want to force these little guys. They're very delicate. Push it through until I can get the black part, that's the actual sensing part, to the middle of the tape. Sometimes it helps to pull the wires from the other side. If you push too hard from this side, you'll end up bending them. And if they touch, it's not going to work. Now you can see that it's not actually against the tape there. It's close, but not actually touching the tape. So what I want to do is press that down. I'm going to even press down on the wires with my thumb there, my thumbnail, until it's stuck to that tape. Simply bend the wires back on the other side, different directions. There's three tiny little solder donuts there. Don't take hardly any solder. And same as the battery holder, you'll find that it probably will flow through to the other side. You can check the other side and you'll see that there's solder on that side as well. Clip the leads, and then you are done for today. Tomorrow I'm going to show you how to calibrate it. The directions will tell you that, and you'll actually calibrate it and get it ready to use. Questions?